ሰላም ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን የሄለን ሾው 23ኛው ሲዝን መጀመሪያ ፕሮግራም ነው ይዘንላችሁ የቀረብነው ዝግጅት በየአመቱ እዚህ ዋሽንግተን ዲሲ የምናዘጋጀው ኤምፓወር ዘ ኮሚኒቲ የሚባለው ዝግጅት 6ኛ አመቱን ኦገስት 20 በዋሽንግተን ኮንቬንሽን ሴንተር ተካሂዶ ውሎ ነበር እዚህ ዝግጅት ላይ ከቀረቡት ፓነል ዲስከሽንስ የመጀመሪያው ቢዝነስ ኤንድ ሊደርሺፕ ፓነል ብለን ያቀረብነው ነው እንግዲህ እነዚህ ኢትዮጵያውያን አሜሪካንና ኤርትራውያን አሜሪካን እንግዶች በትልልቅ ኃላፊነት የተለያዩ የአሜሪካን አገር ኩባንያዎችና ድርጅቶች ውስጥ ኃላፊነት ያላቸው እንግዶች ናቸው ከኑሯቸው ከተሞክሯቸው ከቢዝነስ ጉዟቸው ያካፍሉናል ማለት ነው እንግዲህ ይሄ ዲስከሽን በጣም ብዙዎችን ኢንስፓየር ያደረገ ዝግጅት ነው እናንተንም ደግሞ እንደዚህ ያነቃቃል ብለን እናምናለን እስቲ ወደ ፕሮግራም ልውሰዳችሁ እያንዳንዱን እንግዶቻችንን አስተዋውቀን ወደ ዝግጅቱ እንገባለን ማለት ነው ወደዛ ልውሰዳችሁ
Dr. Brooke Laco's PhD is a physical chemist and a graduate from the University of Paris, France. He has been with NASA for 37 years. His work was instrumental to the success of NASA's Cosmic Background Explorer mission launched in 1989. Then Dr. Brooke went on to work on the Cassini mission, did I say it right? To Saturn, for which he built the far-infrared module that flew with the spacecraft. Whew. The Cassini mission orbited around Saturn for 14 years and made significant discoveries on Saturn and its 33-plus moons. For the last 11 years, he has been Associate Director of Solar System Exploration Division and responsible for future space missions design and R&D. Dr. Brooke just retired. Congratulations. He's living the good life.
Thank you.
And now has the status of emeritus at the NASA Senior Fellow. Welcome, Dr. Brooke.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you.
All right, thank you very much.
Next is Samhar Araya. Samhar is a trained lawyer, policy analyst, and a community advocate. Samhar Araya she's serving as the head of diaspora policy for Mecca, formerly known as Facebook, Africa, Middle East, Turkey public policy team, where she is responsible for developing the company's global diaspora policy priorities and leading strategic engagement with the diaspora stakeholders around the world. Samhar has provided technical expertise, training, research, and advisory support to governments, organizations in Africa, Asia, Arab, and European diaspora communities on the role of the diaspora in international development, community organizing, social impact, and diaspora leadership. Here's something exciting. She is also featured in the Smithsonian at the African American History Museum. That's exciting. She's been awarded by President Obama Champion for Change. Welcome, Samhar.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay. And next is Binyam Gabre. Binyam hails from Dixa in Ethiopia and landed in Washington, D.C. via Sudan, Atlanta, San Bernardino, the Twin Cities, and Boston. Whew. His greatest accomplishment, and I love this, is finally figuring out how to remain emotionally stable when his teenage daughters roll their eyes as he shares brilliant insights about the workings of the universe. Whew. That's a role. Binyam was a partner at McKinsey & Company, where he served more than 60 leading organizations across many industries and 24 countries. He was acting assistant secretary and FHA commissioner in President Barack Obama's administration, where he led an agency with $12 billion operating budget and $1.3 trillion loan portfolio. He was a senior managing director at Accenture, where he led the strategy and consulting group focused on serving the federal government. He grew his team from 600 to 1,500 talented individuals serving U.S. federal agencies at intersection of advanced technologies, management effectiveness across all sectors of government. His latest role, can I say that? Pathfinders, President of Africa, right? Congratulations on your new role. Last but not least, Ms. Maria de Mecca is a partner in Deloitte's government and public service practice. She designs workforce solutions for organizations working to end global poverty. She has 20 plus years of experience leading organizational transformations for U.S. private, nonprofit, and public sector agencies, as well as international clients in Africa, Middle East, South America, Western Europe. She works across sectors including global health, climate change, economic growth, and energy. That's a lot of problems. Maria is the former Council of Women World Leaders Fellow, a member of Deloitte's Emerging Leaders Development Program, and co-founding member of Deloitte's Ethiopian Eritrean Community. Maria holds Master's International Trade and Finance from Harvard University and a BA in Psychology and African Studies from the University of Pennsylvania. She's a proud mother of 3 young children and advocate for equal access and education treatments of rare diseases. Welcome, one and all. I have to say this is one of my favorite panels to host because on my show I hear from a lot of young people from Ethiopia. They always want to look up to somebody. They want mentors, and sometimes most of them, and 100 million people in Ethiopia, most of the young people don't really have mentors that they can look up to, that they can learn from within their own spheres. So when they see programs like this, seeing successful Ethiopian and Eritrean Americans, they can see themselves one day, hey, this is also possible. So I love that we get to do this panel. So I'm going to ask all of you a general question. Dr. Brooke, I'm going to start with you. So NASA scientist, that's such an intriguing work. It goes like that for me, but you have an impressive career. Have you always thought you were going to be a scientist? How did you get into the industry that you were in?
All right, thank you for the question. Essentially what matters is the education that you have. I did my PhD in physical chemistry at the University of Paris. So I always wanted to get get as much education as I could. And so at some point, once you have that education and the need of an organization like NASA match together, then you get the job. I was when I came to this country with my PhD, I didn't know much where I was going to be. But it turns out this mission to measure the average temperature of the universe, led by the Nobel laureate in 2006, John Mather, they needed someone with my expertise to help them solve a problem with the satellite. So that's how I got hired. So essentially what counts is the education that you have. And I think a lot of times young folks get discouraged when the education becomes a little difficult in math, in physics, and so on. But once you are past the mountain, it's much easier downstream. Your job is almost assured if you have a PhD in physics and in chemistry and so on and so forth. So I encourage people to focus not only on the social sciences, but on the applied sciences in physics and chemistry that are very much in need nowadays. A lot of the jobs are in those fields more than in social science and so on and so forth. So I think my education is what allowed me to get to where I was.
Samhar, same question for you. Was your career straight and narrow? You always knew what you want to be, you wanted to go, or did you take the winding road to get to where you are?
So thank you, Helen, and hi, everybody. I'm going to answer a question for, like my friend Rahel did previously, for the families and parents, and then for the young people, okay? I grew up in a family that said, get your education. We came to this country. We want you to be great. I said, okay, I agree. I went to college, and then I went straight to graduate school. I went to law school. I said that I wanted to be a lawyer, but the thing in my head was something that I realized you didn't need a law degree for. So I practiced law, and I ended up learning that there's so many different ways to do the things I'm passionate about. So I was taking my family through a journey of them understanding a law degree is helpful, but it may not be necessary, and let me tell you why. When you get a degree in this country, you have to pay it back. So you have debt, which means you have to take a job that helps you pay the debt, which means for lawyers, you have to go to a place like a law firm. Very different than what my heart wanted. My heart wanted peacemaking, conflict resolution, diplomacy, community empowerment, and helping my country, Eritrea, grow when it became independent. So I was born when the country was still fighting for its independence, and then I grew up wanting to help the country. So what happened is I learned about public policy, and I learned about government, I learned about private sector, and I started working in DC in nonprofits. The trick is my education was funded through many scholarships. I was lucky to have a scholarship to law school. It let me do a lot more things. So as you pursue your dreams, the business of it, the cost of education in this country may make you feel like you have to go down this route. What I want to say is simply my desire to serve the community. I did it in many different ways. I went like this after that. Once I finished law, I went to Congress. I worked for a congressman. Then I went to NGOs. Then I went to government. And I also worked in Africa. I worked in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan. I worked all over. Money was not the reason. It was my mission and my purpose, my joy, my hunger. Because there are ways to do that in this country that we don't know about back home. So I'm very fortunate now to be at Facebook, but I'm not at Facebook because I said I want to work in tech. I'm at Facebook because they said, we care about what you're doing. We like what Dr. Baruch said is build your expertise and the work finds you. And so now I can say that I'm where I am because of the time I spent discovering what I love to do. So for the families and for the young people, I want you to know it's not going to be straight, but if you're doing it from joy and curiosity, it'll take you in many different places. This country allows that. This country allows you to find different ways to do what you love.
Good answer. Binyam, you're next.
It's nice to be here with everybody. I was the little kids that are the teenagers that are out there. They all look like me, so it's kind of nice to see like little versions of me. It's just and that little boy, that was awesome. Yeah. So I have a slightly different story. So I came to the States when I was 9 years old and grew up very, very poor in the projects outside of Los Angeles. And so for me, I didn't know what was possible because it was a single mom with a younger brother who was 10 years younger than me. And I kind of happened to attend college by accident. And I wanted to be a doctor. That was always been a dream to be a doctor. So I majored in chemistry. I was more on the bio side, not the physical side. But I did like those equations on the physical side. And when I was in college and I was thinking about going to medical school, I did the math and I couldn't afford it. And I had my brother with me, so I took custody of my brother. So I raised him with me when I was in college. And so I kind of, for me, it was needing to find a job to support my family, my brother and my mom. That's how I ended up in the consulting world. I didn't know what consulting was. I didn't know what McKinsey & Company was. I didn't know what Deloitte was. So it just happened that I had a friend who was at McKinsey who said I should apply. So I applied because I needed a job. And that's how I landed there. And the idea was to do it for a couple of years until my brother got through sort of the high school years. But I fell in love with it. And what I learned in that transition from, I worked really, really hard to get to medical school. I was top of the class in my chemistry class. I did everything I needed to do to be able to go to the top medical schools in the country. And so that transition was very hard, but it was to abandon that, that life and go into the world of consulting. And what I learned in that transition, and I've applied as I've transitioned from McKinsey and to the Obama administration and to Accenture and the places that I've been, is There's two things. One is work hard. There's nothing that pays like working hard. And the second is be open to what the world has to offer. You may think you know what you want. The world may be telling you to do certain things, but always have your mind open to new opportunities. And you'll find there are amazing things out there. I love consulting. I love working with clients. I love meeting new people in different countries. I love solving problems. And I didn't know that I would love it if I hadn't been open to experiencing it. So work hard, be open to new opportunities.
Good answer. Maria, same question.
Great. Hello, can everyone hear me okay? You guys can hear me? Great. So as you hear, we all have very different paths, and my path looked a little different as well as everyone else's. So my father came from Ethiopia. As Helen said to me earlier, I have to prove that I'm Ethiopian, but I am. I'm Habasha. But my father came from Ethiopia during the communist regime, and he came and, he was a taxi cab driver for 20 years, had 3 children with my mom, who's American, who's here. And we grew up outside of Boston. There were not many Habesha, Ethiopian or Eritrean families at that time. We probably knew almost all of them during that time in the early 80s. My parents honestly worked incredibly hard for us, for me and my sister and brother, to set us on a really positive path and put us in a private school where we were on scholarship from kindergarten all the way through high school. And that put us on a path in a number of ways. One, as you've heard from others, the sort of work hard mentality. Definitely saw my parents doing that, saw our friends doing that, saw family members doing that, saw cousins doing that, and that got really tightly ingrained in us. The other thing that was part of my growing up and development was really, you're here to contribute to the world, and you're here to contribute to society. And not just that, but you have something to contribute. You have something special, and you need to figure out what that is. That's part of your life's journey, to figure out what that is that you can contribute to make the world a better place. And that was just always part of our psyche. And as I mentioned, my dad was a taxi cab driver, and during the daytimes he would go to school, and he eventually got his PhD. And at night he would drive taxis, and I remember sitting in the taxis with him, and I also remember him going to his graduation when he got his PhD, and that really set something in me, in our family. So I am a partner at a consulting firm now. If you had asked me 20 years ago, what is a consulting firm, I would say I have no idea. I don't know what they do. I will tell you guys now because I think it's important to explain. In consulting, what I do specifically is work with governments and work with international development organizations, so the UN, the World Bank, African Development Bank, Asia Development Bank, and we help them so that they can work better. We help them solve their problems so that they can serve the communities. I did not know I would be doing that. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And I thought, well, maybe if I do really well in school, I'll be a psychologist. That's what I wanted to be. But sort of being open to other things took me on different paths. So when I graduated from college, I actually moved back to Ethiopia and worked there for 3 years, doing consulting in different areas, economic development, freedom of the press. And that really gave me one sort of a connection to my culture, which was extremely important. As you all know, you're here today, that's extremely important. But I think especially for the generation of children and kids that are born in the US, it's different. It looks different for them, as you may know, some of your kids, your nieces and nephews. It's a different connection. It's different to learn the language without being in the country. So that was part of my path in just kind of exploring what do I have to contribute to society. Then I came back and I got into Harvard University. I never expected that I would get into Harvard. In fact, I wasn't even going to apply. And I said, well, I'm doing all these other applications, let me just apply. And I got in there and I got a scholarship there as well. So that afforded me, it opened a lot of doors. As we've talked about education, hard work, it opens a lot of doors. But I would say another thing that was really important, and again, you know, as I'm expressing, it's everyone has something to contribute, and part of that has been sharing that and letting people know this is what I have to contribute, and building your network. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but really building your network to understand what is out there. Because if it wasn't people that knew me and introduced me to other people and introduced me to other people, I wouldn't be in the place where I am today. I wouldn't have gone to Deloitte. I wouldn't have made it to partner. There's no way. So just connecting with people is another integral thing. So if you see someone that is doing something that you want to do, go and talk to them. Ask them how they got there. Ask them for some tips. Stay in touch with them. Things like that I think are really important. So thank you all. Excited to have this conversation today with the esteemed panel.
Wonderful, wonderful. So immigrants can face very different challenges in corporate America specifically. Challenges that could make it difficult sometimes to access, stretch opportunities, could be networks, resources, etc. And in your view, I mean, and this question is for everybody, what are some of these systemic challenges and how can we overcome them? How did you overcome some of these challenges, especially Binyam, you said you came at when you were 9 years old, and Dr. Brook the same way. And so sometimes these challenges could be very intimidating because we don't have the network, we don't have the resources, so you don't even try. You just give up before you even try because like this is so unattainable for me. So how do you view that?
Well, when I came to this country, it was in the mid-1980s, so a long time ago. The community was not as large as it was. And I was very lonely at NASA, really, in terms of not many foreign folks and also Ethiopians. They were very, I don't remember, for 10 years I hadn't seen any Ethiopian there. But now things have changed. I think my path, as the others have said, it was not all planned and wasn't a straight line. By nature, I network with people, I talk to people. I had many mentors, like the Nobel laureate John Mather, for instance, was the one who interviewed me and hired me. He was my mentor. I had African American friends. I talked to them. I went out to lunch with them. So all of this allowed me to understand the organization, which is a huge organization. Of course, the motive is not profit. It's a federal agency. But I made it clear that I wanted to be in a position of leadership down the road. So I guess the biggest lesson I can convey to you is not to stay in your cubicle, in your own little world, but to have a network. And also tell people what you want. I want to be, for instance, as you said, I was the associate director of a large division at NASA. But I made it clear to them that I wanted that position. So once you put that seed in the people's mind, they become your allies. They will find ways to make you be in that position. So the main lesson is not to be isolated, to make sure you have a network. And when you are in a meeting, for instance, always make sure you speak up or ask a question. If something is not clear in your mind, it's probably not clear for a lot of people, but they don't dare ask the question. And so if you're a young early career person in a meeting, don't get intimidated. Ask the question. And little by little, you become the subject matter expert in that area. And people will want your opinion. And they end, oh, what does Brooke think about this? Because I expressed my question. So it took time. It's not easy to do it. But eventually, you become noticed. And then you are in a position of leadership already. So that would be my message about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Same question, Samhar. So are there systemic challenges? How would you overcome them in corporate culture?
I'm new to business. I come from government, nonprofit, and community. But one thing that I've learned in every space, I'm going to say something that is important. In our culture, what do we value the most? We value family, we value faith, we value community. The thing we also value is Sina Sirat. In Tigrinya, Sina Sirat. Okay? Sina Sirat is a beautiful thing. I take honor in honoring my elders, honoring my relatives, honoring my community. But in the workplace, Sina Sirat gets in the way, okay? Because you are seeing, oh, let me work hard, let me stay in my cubicle, and they'll see. The problem here is that in this country, you can keep your sana saraat, but you have to also acquire some other skills, which means networking, speaking up for yourself, making friends and allies, and also not being afraid to go out on your own. You will get criticized for it because now you don't have sana saraat. You forgot about us. But the truth is if you're really in the work for impact and service to others, that's what's required here. So in corporate America, I've learned a couple things, and also previously. One, your intelligence and knowledge is not enough. You have people who are willing to advocate for you and say, you should ask Samhar. Two, you need to have mentors are people that take time to help you grow. But in a corporate America, in business, in nonprofit, you need what's called a sponsor. Someone who's more senior, who will make sure you're in a meeting, or who will nominate you for things so you can grow. Promotion. Because promotions in any sector don't happen because you were there for 3 years. You can be in a job for 3 years in this country and not get promoted. The third thing is building a community in your workplace. So I'm the chair of the Eritreans and Ethiopians group at Facebook, because out of the tens of thousands of people, there's a lot of Eritreans and Ethiopians. And I'll also acknowledge there's Somalis, there are Sudanese, there are all of us. But we build community internally. I'm also a member of the Black employees. I'm a member of women. Community in corporate America is important if you are Black, if you are underrepresented, if you are an immigrant. It's even more vital. So your leadership comes in those ways. So I always remind young professionals that sometimes sana saraat is what you've known so well, but in the workplace, it means you're not speaking at a meeting, you're not writing an email until you're asked. It means you're not going to an event because you think it's not my place. It is your place. If you don't take it, someone else will. So I'm saying it with love, but I really want, especially second generation Eritrean and Ethiopian Americans who are raised in our households, I want you to think about how you keep your sana saraat in your life, but how you also show up at the workplace. Okay?
Good answer, good answer. So Binyam, systemic challenges that you see in corporate America that as immigrants that we may, shy away from or not get the opportunities that we need, how do you overcome those?
Yeah, so I'm gonna build on this, because for me, the way I thought about it is the biggest systemic challenge that we have is ourselves. Like our own minds, the stories we tell ourselves about what we should do, what we can't do, and it's built, partly because of how we're raised. And you know what? The thing is, it's not necessarily unique to us. Like we have our version of it. But the challenge that I see most often, and I have so many stories of young people that have worked for me that are brilliant, but they don't know it, and they don't show it, and they don't, and they end up not proceeding in their careers the way they can or they should. And so to me, the systemic challenge is getting out of our own heads. I mean, the most important lesson that I learned early in my career at McKinsey, and Seti's probably not going to like this, but is how to be arrogant. There was a moment I was working really, really hard, and everybody loved me because I was willing to work 20 hours a day. I'll go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, get up at 4 o'clock, and keep going. But there was a moment where somebody got this thing in my head about how amazing I am, and I didn't believe them, and something happened that showed that I'm pretty awesome. And I was like, holy crap, I'm pretty good. And at that moment, I showed up with much more swagger, as they say. And that's when, for me at least, things started accelerating fairly rapidly. I mean, I got elected partner very early, and I was like, I could do anything. And once that switch came on, I mean, things just started to happen. And it's not, I mean, it's not as simple as I'm describing, but just getting out of your own way, getting out of your own head, and instead of talking to yourself, negotiating with yourself about why you shouldn't do something, try it. Just do it. So for me, that's, you know, I love what you said, and I completely agree with this. So get out of your own head. That's the most systemic problem.
That's a good thing. And Maria, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, well, I can say I'm still working on becoming arrogant, so I'll keep trying. No, I think that was a really great point, and I echo what the others have said, especially about getting out of your own way and setting your own limitations. And often, always, you can do much more than you limit yourself to do. But on systematic barriers in general, I do also think that there are real barriers that exist in corporate America. And it's important to be able to understand those and to be able to analyze them. And one of the things that I faced somewhat early in my career is, as others have talked about, sort of working really hard, keeping your head down, staying in your cubicle, and just thinking that my performance, my excellence is going to get me to the next level or get me to the next place doesn't work in the US. You have to figure out what is happening in that organization, who is making the decisions, how do you align yourself, or how do you figure out sort of how you're going to fit into this organization, and how are they going to take what you have to bring and develop that. So, you know, we mentioned mentorship and sponsorship, and I think those are really critical. But as you look for a sponsor in whatever organization you're in, be really careful to look at where that person is positioned and how they can help you and how they can bring you along. And then I would say, too, just in terms of that distinction, I think it's a really important distinction about having a mentor and having a sponsor. A mentor is often someone you can bounce ideas off of. You can discuss the challenges you're having, the day-to-day challenges. You can get advice from them. A sponsor is really someone who you are going to entrust in helping you move to the next levels, who will actually sponsor you to sort of continue to grow. So, I mean, is there still systematic bias, racism, sexism in corporate America? Absolutely, yes, there is. And sort of every day, all of us, you know, I think are working to combat that in our own ways. But I would say my advice is look and try to understand it, and try to understand your organization, and try to understand what you bring, and be yourself in that. You don't need to assimilate into the culture how it is. You don't need to talk a certain way. When I was sort of in more junior positions, I used to often get, you need to talk louder. You need to talk deep with a deeper voice. And I just kept banging my head against the wall, like, I can't, that's not who I am. That's not the way I talk. I don't talk with a deeper voice. I'm not the first person to come in the room and start, you know, shouting out things. That's not the way that I work. So I had to spend a lot of time developing, who am I? What is my voice like, both sort of physically, but also sort of philosophically, what is my voice that I bring, and how do I bring myself to every meeting? How do I bring myself to every discussion? And really just lean into that and be myself and do that. And I think that's the way we break down these systematic barriers, is we be ourselves and we bring our excellent selves, and we change the culture. We change it every day in everything that we're doing, both intentionally and unintentionally. So.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you all to be a little vulnerable. Describe, I guess, I hate to say failure because it's not failure, but were there some disappointments in your career? What lessons did you learn from them, and in what ways did they contribute to your current success? So, because we all, like, nobody's perfect. Nobody got to wherever you have gotten without failure or mistakes. So is there anything that you could share that you think was a failure, and how you overcame it, and where you are, how you overcame it in general?
Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing to talk about my failure. But when I left Ethiopia, first year in college in France, I arrived in a small town called Grenoble, And 2 days after my arrival, there was snow. I had never seen snow before. I kept falling because my shoes were not the right ones, and I was falling all the place. I didn't have the right clothing. Anyway, that year was very, very difficult. I couldn't focus on my studies. I was missing my parents, and so on and so forth. There was no mobile phone to call mom and say hi. It was very difficult. And so that year, academically, I really struggled. And my grades were, not up to par. So I had to start again the next year, the same courses, essentially. So I was deeply hurt by that because I was used to, getting good grades and so on. But something like that taught me that I have to do better. I had to reorganize my life. So I started running. I did half marathons, for instance, when running was not cool in the late 70s. I became much more disciplined. I not only focused on science and physics and chemistry, but started reading philosophy books, books that gave me guidance on life, on how to deal with people and so on. I had planned how many times per year I was going to travel in Europe, and I did everything according to plan. So in a way, that really, was a springboard to what I am today. And I remember very well the day. It was June 22nd. That day I celebrate every year, June 22nd, because that's when I made that decision. And so in a way, we go through all these things, each one of us, through ups and downs. And then through crisis, you learn quite a bit. And so I think our lives are not straight lines, like the other panels said. And there are moments you learn from your mistakes. And so my message to younger children or younger folks nowadays is to assess their lives and see, how can I make my life better? It's taking care of yourself is very important. Your physical self is very important. Resting is very important. Reading is very important also. So just don't, each moment, every day that passes without you benefiting from it is a wasted time and day. And so I think that's what I can convey. My failure catapulted me to where I am today in many ways.
Same question, somehow.
I could just talk about this. So one thing I'll say is failure is not a word I use for myself. I use them as lessons that are teachable lessons for me. So I have examples in school, in work, and in community. In school, I went to school, like I said, school. My heart in it. My heart wasn't in it, and I was realizing that quite quickly. I went to a school that didn't have my area of specialty. I lived in a town that didn't have the community that I needed, and I was struggling in law school, and I did very badly my first year in law school in the first semester because of all of these personal and things I shared. So my grades were shocking because I had never had that before. It taught me that I needed to switch schools. So I got out of my law school and I moved from Milwaukee, where I had the full scholarship that I shared with you. And then I went to Washington, D.C. at the top school, and I paid for it, and I took out loans, and I excelled. So the lesson of failing, doing horribly in my previous semester, forced me to make a major life decision. A second example is I started a nonprofit, a women's organization, Diaspora African Women's Network, and I ran Dawn as a nonprofit for 10 years. While I worked full-time, I ended up needing to focus on the nonprofit. So I left my profession in international development and ran a nonprofit. But it wasn't sustainable because you couldn't find funding. I had all of this great work, and I wasn't finding support from funders, from the community, from donors. So I had to shut down my nonprofit. And it breaks my heart to this day, like it still hurts. And then I started a business, and I did semi-consulting and I was a consultant, and I did well, but it wasn't working for my personal life. It meant that I was always working with clients, governments, NGOs, communities. So these moments of deep, of having to change my life plans dramatically were really helpful lessons, because it helped me, congratulate myself for learning a lesson and making a better decision. So I try not to be hard on myself for failures, but in business, what they say is every failure is a chance to get it right another time. So you just keep it moving. You keep it moving. And the last thing I'll say is at Facebook, at Meta, we have a saying, one of our sayings on a reminder is the work is only 1% finished. So we're only 1% finished. That's our company mentality of all the things there are to discover. So as you realize one thing doesn't work, you just pivot and try again and try again. So that's my answer.
Great. Binyam, what would you say?
My life is like full of failures, and I try not to call them failures, but when I look in the mirror, I'm like, man, you're really failing. I will say, when it comes to the career stuff, there have been projects that have fallen apart. I've cost my company, my clients, millions of dollars from projects that have been screwed up. I have hired the wrong people. I have fired the wrong people. I've been, investigated for firing people. I've been investigated for for policy things. There are lots and lots of different over the past 22 years. And they're always super painful, but they're always an opportunity to learn, right? And I was lucky to have people around me who were comfortable with that kind of, losing $50 million. Like, okay, that's fine. Let's move on, and we'll let's investigate a new opportunity or whatever, right? So for me, those failures were lessons. But if I were to be vulnerable, I would say the mistake I've made in my life, I've made a lot of mistakes, but the biggest one I've made is not truly understanding the link between my work and my family, and how to balance those things.
Very honest answer.
Yeah, it is an area where I have failed, and I'm coming to terms with it now. I'm 45 years old, and getting my head around. I've failed my brother. I have failed my mom, and getting
But it happens though.
Yeah.
The key is you're at the point in your life where you say, I saw where there was this shortcomings, but I learned. It's like a lesson, just like what Samhar said, what Dr. Brooks said. They were learning opportunities, let's just say. Right?
Yeah, and for me, I had to hit a bit of rock bottom to.
Yeah.
I mean, coming to this is a foreign concept to me. I have avoided this community my whole life after I left to go to college. And I'm going to Addis next week.
Good for you. You'll enjoy it.
So figuring out, I've worked really, really hard over many years, and waiting this long to figure this thing out has cost me. As I believe deeply in working really hard and changing the world, and know that as you're doing that in your younger years, that you can do that and still be one with your family. And that's a lesson I'm learning now. So that's my biggest
huge. That's huge, Binyam. And I'm hoping that everyone that's hearing this understands before you get there. That's the life lesson that you're sharing, right? I discovered it a little late, but I've learned from it now. And so this is a lesson for everybody else. Before you get there, see how you can balance both. Maria, what would you say?
Yeah, so sort of in the similar vein of work and family and life intersecting, I have a 6-year-old son, a 4-year-old daughter, and a 1.5-year-old son. I think they're here on the in the bouncy house somewhere. But when, you know, I think the biggest mistake that I made and learned from when my 6-year-old was born, I took a few months, I took about 4 or 5 months off from work to take care of him when he was born. And I went back to work, and it was horrible, like, for lack of a better term. I mean, I would go to the bathroom and cry in between meetings because I missed him so much. I would rush home. I couldn't concentrate at work. I was worried about him all day, and he's coming in. He's going to get embarrassed if you guys see him. But that was a really, really hard time for me. It was a really painful time, and it was the first time in my life where at work they were telling me, "You're not doing a good job." I got bad reviews. They were telling me, "Do you really want to be here?" Like, all of these things that I had really never experienced because I was so focused, and I just couldn't figure out how to make that balance work. It was just overwhelming and too hard for me at that time. And so I sort of pushed through it painfully, and, you know, like I said, got those bad reviews, like didn't do well for a long time. And then when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, I said, okay, I'm gonna, you know, really try to do this right. So I ended up taking a year off from work with her, and that was amazing to be able to spend the time with. Now I had the 2-year-old and a newborn, and I spent the time with her, and it was amazing. And it was hard to go back to work, but I think what I had learned from the first situation with my first son was I needed to set my own boundaries and say, this is what I can do, and this is what makes sense for me and for my family. And just to say, like, challenges happen. So, you know, then I got pregnant with my 3rd son, and I was like, okay, I totally know how to do this now. Like, I have 2 little kids, and I'm working, and things are going along. And then we got the news that he has a genetic disease. He has a genetic condition that was going to be a lifelong condition that was, you know, without treatment would be terminal. And I fell apart. I mean, like, there's no other way to say it, just fell apart. And I spent a lot of time kind of just regrouping myself and getting myself prepared, and were incredibly lucky and got connected to amazing medical treatments at Johns Hopkins, which is local here. And I was able to, I mean, by no means am I doing it perfectly or anything like that, but I was able to really, with my work and with my family, do a couple things. One was to say, hey, I need help. Like, I can't do this. So my mom came and moved with us to help us. My family kind of rallied around us, and I said I was like, I just can't do this. Like, I need you guys. My husband rallied. My husband has the 3 kids now back there. But so I think one thing is saying when you need help and when you need support from your family, and, you know, giving that support and getting that support is sort of why we have family, right? It's like through thick and thin, and just to remember that whatever goals you're driving towards, whatever things you're driving towards, to remember that piece of it is get the support you need. And then the second one is really with your career and with work, it's a couple things. One, set your boundaries to what you can do. I always knew I wanted to have kids. I always knew I wanted to have a career. I couldn't quite figure out how that was going to work out, and it was through a lot of ups and downs that will continue to be ups and downs for sure. But it's possible, and it's more than possible. It's doable, and I think the more that we sort of talk about what are the challenges, what are the things, how do we overcome them, and support each other, as we talked about through community, it's doable and possible. And I'm happy to see that there's so many women and mothers and fathers in the workforce And I think it's just important that we set that example for our kids as well. So just use the resources that you have. Depend on your family, support your family, because you're going to need them through thick and thin. And just in terms of work, just tell them, set your boundaries as to what you can do and what you can't do. And when you're doing it, do it as well as you can. But just you are in charge of your career and you are in charge of what's going to happen in your life. Don't let anyone else dictate that to you.
Excellent. So young people are very idealistic, right? Is it practical to say, hey, you can be anything you want to be, or you can achieve anything you want to be? We want to say that to our children because we don't want to limit them. But is it realistic to say that or not? Doctor?
I think before I answer that question, one thing I learned from my father and my mother, especially my dad, was that we were 6 boys in the house. And when we came back with our report cards from school, he never compared us with each other. He never said, oh, your brother's doing better. Each one of us would get in the living room, he would look at it and say, this needs to be better, and so on and so forth, but in privacy. And that's very important in my view, because if you do that between your children, you're comparing them, you're setting them up to be competitive, to not be friends really, they're competitors. And these are siblings that should be together and friends and advisors and so on for the rest of their lives. And so I was free in my way, in a way, to do whatever I wanted to do, and I was never compared to my older brother who was better than me or so on and so forth. So that would be my big advice. This is an unsolicited advice, but I still go ahead and do it. The other thing is, I think parents put a lot of pressure sometimes when they say, you can do whatever you want, the sky's the limit for you. If the child is, exceptionally gifted and knows what they want to do, it's fine. But a lot of times, you can do whatever you want to do. What is the sky's the limit? It has no limit. The bar is so high, it can be actually counterproductive in my view. I may be wrong. I'll leave it to educators to expand on it. But I think telling them early that their choices are limited. There are generally 2 or 3 or 4 paths in life that they have. I mean, it can be more than that, but in general, it's not unlimited. And so having them focus on what they're good at, not forcing them to choose one area, but showing them that there is boundaries. In everything that we do, there is boundaries. For instance, for space missions, the Webb telescope you've heard about recently, everything has a budget, has a deadline, has a constraint. And so in our lives, it's the same thing. It's not unlimited. So the choices that you make early in life help you. But if you're wandering around, choosing this today, choosing that tomorrow, and so on and so forth, you might end up at the same spot many years down the road. So I think one has to be careful when they say to their child, the sky is the limit. The sky is wide open. There's no end to it. So they're never going to achieve what you expect them to achieve in a way, because when you say that, you're expecting them to be very, very high achievers. And so this is my personal experience, but I think it's a good question. I would love to hear what the other panelists have to say about it.
As the other panelists answer, because I'm told we got 5 minutes, I also want, so Samhar, Ben, you can add to what, Dr. Brooks said, but like in a shorter way, one practical advice that you want to leave to our, not just audience here, because we have, millions of viewers in Ethiopia and Eritrea that are going to be watching this program. One practical advice that I can share, what would that be? And you can add to what he said, but.
So, first of all, my newborn baby, her name is Samai, because I do believe the sky's the limit for her. But I think that boys and girls in this country should be raised to know that they have options and that you have to work hard for it. But those options, I think it's important. The practical advice I would give you is chase after what you're curious about, what you're passionate about, and be ready to make sacrifices for it. So if you want to work for the community, you're not going to make a salary that allows you to do certain things in this country. Or if you say, I really want to have a certain salary, then that means you're going to have to make decisions a little differently to get there. So I do feel that there's an important space that we are afforded here of really being able to shape a lot of your life. You can't control all of it, but you need to know that God is in the driver's seat, but you are in the earthly driver's seat. And for whatever comes your way, you have options. You can make decisions. The most important thing I think about for Semi, she's a year and a half the same age, is I'm trying to teach her how to make decisions. Just she's a baby, but she's not. She's making decisions already. So I want her to learn how to navigate whatever comes her way and make a decision that is from her heart and her mind, not from her pressure from me, not pressure from the community, not pressure from media, but from her. So that's probably what I'd say.
Practical advice, one practical advice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just build on what she said. I'm a big believer in helping your kids both be unbounded in what they can do, but then help guide them through how to like work within their potential. So my kids wanted to be Olympic swimmers. Like, yeah, they were just realizing that they can't be Olympic swimmers. And so, but the ambition that they had to do that was great. And so, I would say, unless you have you're very poor and have family to take care of, and therefore you cannot, you just have to pay the bills. To me, that's the only constraint. Otherwise, my view is work hard, keep your mind open, try things out. So that's, my one and practical advice.
That's a great advice. Be open. I love it. One practical advice.
Okay, so quickly, I would say focus on your strengths and what you're passionate about, and work hard, and things will come your way. The universe will attract itself. I wish that I could have been a NASA scientist. I'm not sure I have the capabilities in me to do that, but I have other capabilities that I contribute to, and I can develop. So, maybe you're a wonderful artist. Maybe you are a great athlete. You strive and try to do those things the best you can. If nothing else, you will learn other lessons from those, and it will guide your life on a path that you may not have expected. So think about your strengths and what you do well, and try to continue to develop your weaknesses, but really hone in on what you're good at and what you love and what gives you energy and joy, and do as much of that as you can. And that doesn't mean video games or things like that. That means things that are fruitful and that will develop you and will develop society.
But can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
The world is changing so fast that the jobs that are here today will not be here tomorrow. And the jobs of our kids don't even exist yet. So the child who says, I'm going to play video games for the rest of my life, you're going to think they're crazy. But they might be onto something. So I just want to note, we are in a rapidly changing society right now, and the jobs of the children of the next generation don't exist yet. So this is what's exciting and scary.
Oh, okay. Dr. Brook, what do you have to say?
Something totally unrelated. The Webb telescope you've heard of recently discovered that hydrogen and oxygen that we have in our bodies were formed about 13 billion years ago. So how exciting is it to know that in your body you have oxygen that may have been created 13 billion years ago? Isn't that great? Yeah. It's unrelated.
That's a scientist thing to say, and I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Dr. Brook. Thank you, Samhar. Thank you, Binyam and Maria.
ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ እንደተከታተላችሁት ይሄ የቢዝነስ ኤንድ ሊደርሺፕ ፓነል ነበር በኤምፓወር ዘ ኮሚኒቲ ዊኬንድ። በሚቀጥለው ሳምንት ደግሞ ያንግ ትሬል ብሌዘርስ የሚባል ሌላ ፓወር ፓነል ዲስከሽን አለ። እሱን ደግሞ ይዘንላችሁ እንቀርባለን። በሚቀጥለው ሳምንት እስከምንገናኝ ደህና ቆዩልን።